that could be an explanation as to why I don't know what in the hell I am talking about right now. So, hey makeup friends, and welcome back to the channel, or if you're new here, then hello and welcome. My name is Kara, and today I'm going to be sharing with you some of the palettes that I have in my collection. It's not going to be quite as random as that might sound. Really, what I've been doing lately is really trying to think about why I used to spend as much money as I did on makeup versus now, where I don't really buy an awful lot of makeup. What has changed? What thought patterns am I going through when I'm looking at makeup? What are some of my deciding factors? And so to get to that point, I really had to look at what were my thought patterns when I was looking at new makeup releases. And it ranges from it's new and I'm curious, so I want to get it, to I think that my audience is going to be interested, so I'm going to buy that, to everybody else has bought it and seems to really like it, so I should buy it too, or FOMO as the case may be. And then there's another one that kept coming up for me, and that is I'm going to get so much use out of it. I have told myself that so many times about so many things, not just makeup, but for the purposes of this video, obviously that's what we're going to focus on. But I have said that to myself so many times. I'll see a new palette and I'll be like, hey, that's me in a palette. I should buy that. Or this looks like a really solid staple palette to add to my collection that I'm going to use all the time. And it turns out that that's rarely ever the case. Apparently, I'm just not particularly skilled at knowing myself and knowing what it is that I'm actually going to reach for. But I'm learning when I'm looking at new releases to think a little bit beyond the surface of just it's new, I'm curious, or other people have liked it, and really think about where it would fit in my collection and would I realistically get as much use out of it as I think I might, or as I want to believe that I might in order to justify the purchase. And so then I took it a next step and I thought, okay, so let me pull out some of the palettes that I remember having that thought on, that I'm going to use these all the time. What was it about these palettes that really had me convincing myself of that? And so when I culled through and gathered them, I think what the overarching theme with all of them was that I thought that they were going to be longtime favorites. I thought that I was going to get regular, consistent use out of them, not exclusive use. I have so many palettes that I never buy something thinking that I'm going to use it every single day. But I did think that these were all palettes that I would be reaching for more often than I reach for other palettes in my collection. And it turns out that's just not the case. That's not to say that I don't like these palettes, because I very, very much do, but they're not the top tier for me. They're not the ones that live sort of front and center in my brain, and when I sit down to do my makeup in the morning, they're not the ones that float to the top and make me reach for them. The ones that I'm going to show you that are the reality, that are the ones that get consistent and frequent use, most of them, I think there might be one. I think there's one that I thought I would use very frequently, but the vast majority of them were just kind of sleeper hits for me. I wasn't expecting to love them as much as I do. So with that rather lengthy preamble out of the way, let's get into this. So we're going to start off with the palettes that are the most colorful that we're going to see today. And I don't often buy colorful palettes thinking that I'm going to get a ton of use out of them. I buy them more so, if the color story just looks really fun. In the past, I would buy it if the packaging looked fun. But for the most part, when I buy colorful eyeshadows, I'm really thinking more utilitarian, more how many colors are in there that I can reach for if I'm feeling creative, if I want to make colorful looks. What kind of has everything all in one? Not to say I don't buy monochromatic palettes as well, because I do, but I've also decluttered the vast majority of them. So let's talk Blend Bunny. So when Blend Bunny first came out with the Blends palette, I thought this was going to be the rainbow palette of my dreams. So let's take a look. It is an all matte palette, and I will say Blend Bunny really excels at the matte formula. I'm not as much in love with their shimmer formula, but their mattes, above reproach. I really have nothing bad to say about them. And so obviously you can see there are a ton of colors in here, and I do use this palette. However, when I do have that creative spark and I am looking for shades along those lines, or at least a variety of shades, and blends isn't often the one that I actually end up using. Surprising to me, it's this one here, also from Blend Bunny, but this is the Surge palette. And it's not your traditional rainbow palette. There is a variety of shades in there, but you can see that it's not nearly as rainbow-y. How else? What's another word to use? I don't know. So you can see Surge over here does have a variety of colors to choose from, but it's not as traditionally rainbow as, say, Blends is. And what I really like about the Surge palette, what I gotta say, I really like the top 3 shades, or the top 3 rows. I'm not as big a fan of these two. Not in love with their shimmer formula. I do find my best chance of success with them is using my finger. I find they're very difficult to pick up on a brush. And even if you can get them on the brush, then depositing it onto your eye can be tricky as well. And the neons, I just haven't had much success in working with them. They're very, very powdery. I find that they blend away, and I just find it to be frustrating to work with them. However, these 3 rows here, they are heavy hitters in my collection. Especially in the center here, there's just something about the tones of these purples and really deep maroon shades that I just love. Even though Blends does have reds and purples, I just tend to gravitate towards the actual tone of the reds and purples in the Surge palette instead. I said earlier that one of the thought processes that I often have is, that's me in a palette. And I actually did start off wanting to do this video just looking at me in a palettes, but my tastes have changed so much over the last, I'd say, 2 years that it's now hard for me to really determine what my thought process was like 18 months ago. So I kind of scrapped that, but there is one that I do very vividly remember thinking and probably saying in a video at some point, that is me in a palette, and that is Retro from Natasha Denona. I love purple shadows. These kind of tones are very, very flattering on my eye color, and so I tend to wear them a lot, or at least I did. Now I am very much living in my neutral comfort zone. I do step out from it occasionally, but this is my go-to. But at the time that I bought this, I really did think, look at all of those warmer tones in there. That is me in a palette. These are the colors that I love. And I do. However, that's not the palette that I automatically reach for. It's this one, also from Natasha Denona, Glam. This really is a go-to palette for me. This one does get more use out of Retro. And it's not really about the quality, because I do find that these two palettes are very comparable in terms of how their mattes and their shimmers perform. What I think it comes down to is that this one I really don't need to think about. Not that you can really mess this one up, but this one does have some browns in it. It does have like a very light sparkly pink. The deep purple over here has a lot of heavy shimmer in it. So this one's just a little bit more thought-provoking, I suppose. Dial that word down about 10 notches and that's the right level that I'm trying to say. It's not like, I'm solving cold fusion by using this palette. It's just, I have to put in a little bit more thought to it than when I reach for Glam. Now, oddly though, there are some neutral palettes that I've bought thinking, again, those are the ones that I'm going to use all the time, that really do take a back seat to others. So, for example, we've got this one here from Natasha Denona. This is the Groundwork palette. And this one's kind of interesting because you have the larger pans have like a putty slash sort of cream product in them, and then the smaller pans are powders. And given the range of tones that are in here, I really thought that this would be like a perfect palette for everyday use because I can go neutral, I can go a little bit on the cooler tone. There are some more strongly warm tones in here as well. but I just don't reach for it. It's not, I don't think it's any fault of the palette at all. I think I do need to play with it a little bit more to get more familiar with the cream shadows that are in here because they're just not what I'm used to working with. I have worked with them in the past, but they're just not the typical formula that I prefer. And I knew that when I bought this, but I still just thought, this is going to be my everyday palette. And it turns out it's not. It's a good palette. It's a very interesting palette, and I do think that artists would probably love this. I just need to sort of ramp up the learning curve on it a little bit, play with it some more, and really figure out how to make it work for me. In reality, the neutral palette that I reach for over and over and over again is this little wee guy here from Makeup by Mario. This one is the Foreplay Everyday Quads in Nude 2. I have given it a lot of love on this channel, and there's a reason for it. I use the hell out of this palette. I love it, and it is quite versatile for being 4 shades. You've got 2 mattes, one more of like a foiled metallic, and then one that's a really thin micro glitter. I love the micro glitter. I think it's so beautiful. Even just on its own, it just adds like a little bit of reflection on the lids and just makes me feel just a little bit prettier than if I didn't have it on. But I did say that this is versatile. You wouldn't think so just looking at it, but you can put a really thin wash of that sparkle on your lid and call it a day. Or you can go in, and this isn't like the deepest brown in the world, but it will like pack on and it will create a lot of dimension and a lot of drama on the eyes. And you can really go sort of heavy-handed with it. It blends out really nicely. And then you have this like almost cream-like shimmer shadow up here, which is just so intense on the eyes and so, so pretty. I'll just, you know what, there's only 4 of them. I'll just swatch them out. So there they are on the fingers, and then, oh, swatching the viewfinder is always dangerous because I have no depth perception. There we go. So you can see, like, even though that brown isn't like the deepest brown out there, it's deep enough. And it, again, just makes it a really easy palette to work with because there's never any risk that I'm going to go too far, where that can exist with this one, because if you look at the depth in the shades there is even all the way to black. And there have been many a time over the years where I've thought, I'm just going to add a little bit more deep brown, and then the next thing you know, I have like a smoky black eye going on because I don't know when to stop. You don't run into that with this little palette. I honestly don't know if you can even still purchase these. I think they were just limited, but I am so glad I got my hands on it because I love this palette so much. And then there's times that I buy palettes that I think, they're going to solve all of my makeup problems because there are so many shades to choose from. Enter Full Bloom from Tarte. I loved the Tartelette in Bloom palette that they had, and so I figured I would love this one as well. I mean, we've got a whole variety of colors to work with in there, a little bit of a spread in between sort of browns and pinks, all the colors that typically just set my heart on fire. I think I've used this maybe a handful of times. I don't really know how I feel about it. I like the quality of the shadows. There's nothing to complain about there. The mattes blend beautifully. The shimmers are nice and impactful. They pick up very easily on a brush. They stay put. They don't flake. They don't, bunch up on my lids. All the things that I'm looking for in a palette, this delivers, and yet I never really think to just bring it out. And where I possibly went wrong is the fact that there's just so many shades in it that it becomes a little overwhelming. And as well, the layout doesn't really work for my brain. I like things on a gradient. My brain just really likes linear stuff. It likes things arranged in columns or rows. This just looks a little hodgepodge to me, and I think when I look at it, I'm just like, what do I do? There's just too many, and then I glitch. And that's entirely my own fault because I saw promo pictures of it. I should have known that that was going to present a challenge to me. Holy shit, almost to the degree that filming this freaking palette is challenging me. Also, another somewhat minor complaint, but a complaint nonetheless. There's only one really deep shade. This palette would stand to benefit from a really deep, like maroony kind of purple. Something with a lot stronger of a red base than this to really play up the pink and purple tones that you see throughout the palette. That I don't know, there's just something missing from this palette. I think it could, yeah, and it's entirely my own fault. Like I said, I saw promo pictures of it. I knew what I was getting into when I ordered it. And yet I convinced myself that this was going to be my savior of all daily makeup palettes, and it's just not. But there is one that is. Again, Makeup by Mario. This is the Ethereal Eyes palette. It was gone for a while. It is now back on the Sephora website, but I don't know how long for. And I know that this has received mixed reviews. I'm gonna be perfectly honest, I don't watch makeup reviews. Even though this is not a review channel, even though I tend not to do dedicated reviews, if you've watched a couple of my videos, you've probably come to realize that I still do give reviews. I just do it in a different format than, hey, there's this new palette, let's talk exclusively about that new palette. I still like to share my opinions on the products that I have with you, and so I don't want to be influenced by other people. However, even when I don't actively search the reviews out, I still hear about things, and I do know that this one has received mixed reviews. Some people find that it's a little bit too, shall we say, gentle, weak, if you will, and some people don't like the shimmers in it. I happen to fucking love this palette. First of all, it's beautiful. It is very, very similar to the Tartelette Full Bloom palette, but obviously much more condensed. As you can see, I have gotten very good use out of it. And it's just such an easy palette to work with that I just grab for it almost automatically. It lives top of mind for me. I always enjoy working with it. I understand how the shadows work. I know that the shimmers are going to last all day on me, and I know that no matter what combination of shades I come up with, that it's all going to work together and that it's all going to be flattering. And so one thing I would point out is that these deeper shades that are in here, this is where the weak or gentle kind of comes into play. They don't apply that deeply on the eyes. So there's the finger swatches of them. But once you apply it and sort of blend it out a bit, now granted I'm blending with my fingers, so just sort of take a little bit of a grain of salt with what I'm saying, but once you blend them out, they do sheer out a fair amount. And I do find that these don't build up to the full opacity that you would see in the pan. So even when I add additional layers, it doesn't ever get as deep as what it shows in the pan. And I think that's very frustrating to some people. However, again, for my purposes, I love that because I can't fuck my makeup up just before heading out the door to work. Doesn't matter what I do, this palette is gonna have my back. And like I said, it's just beautiful. You'll hear me say time and time again that things are brainless yet beautiful. That's this. I don't have to put any brain work towards creating looks with this, and they're still gonna be beautiful. As I'm doing this video, I'm starting to think, well, maybe I should do another declutter. Like, why am I holding on to this if I don't really reach for it? I don't know. I don't have answers to that. Except I don't want to get rid of it, and so I'm not going to. So that's going to bring us to the last two palettes. So the expectation was that Soft Cashmere from Dior was going to become a longtime favorite. It checks all the boxes that I'm looking for. It's neutral. There's only 5 shades. It's all very pretty. I do like the mix of the shadows, like the finishes, the mattes versus the shimmer ratio that's going on here. I thought that this was going to be living on the top of my desk and getting a lot of love, or at least that's what I told myself. In reality though, it's the palette that I've got on my eyes right now that holds that honor. This is Cold Brew from Kaleidos. Similar kind of idea, but here we have 3 mattes in a very nice gradient and then a shimmer over here. And the thing that I really like about this shimmer is that it can be very, very high intensity, or I can just take one little pass and then just kind of like dot it on my lids just to add a little bit of something without going full blown, or I can get the full impact of it. And so that just gives a little bit of variety, which is always a good thing when you're working with a quad. If it can be versatile in the sense of how it is applied, I love that. I'm never going to be able to make like a bunch of different looks with it. I guess if I was a little bit more creative with like graphic eyeshadow placement and things like that, but I'm not. So typical use for this, I can do a daytime look, or I can do a full-on glam look with just these 4 shadows. As well, I don't need to use all of the mattes. So on days where I'm in a rush, wow, that was really aggressive. On days when I'm in a rush, or on days like when I'm just running errands and I just want to feel pulled together and feel pretty within myself, but I don't want to spend a ton of time, and I also don't want to be like the crazy lady at the grocery store with like a glitter cut crease. Honestly, if you are that lady, you have my full respect, and if I saw you at the grocery store, I'd probably come up and compliment you, give you a high five, and ask which palette you're wearing. However, I think you get my point. This palette does it all, and I freaking love it. So what was the point of this video, and what message am I trying to relay with this? If you are somebody who is trying to cut down on how much you consume, how many products you buy, I think there is some value in reviewing what you already have before you make that purchase. Really looking, like I've done here, at what you thought was going to be your favorite versus what actually is your favorite. And then trying to find some parallels with whatever product it is that you're considering purchasing. For example, I've done that recently with the new NARS palette. Can't for the life of me remember what it's called off the top of my head, but here it is. When I first saw it, I was like, oh, that is me in a palette, add to cart. And then I was like, let's add to Love's List instead, and let's just let a little bit of time pass and see. But the more time that has passed since it hit the website, and the more I look at it, the more I start to think, I'm not entirely sure that I would use you as much as I think that I would. If only because it really doesn't bring anything new to the table. And I'm pretty confident that I don't actually want to buy it. And that saved me almost $100 at this point, just on that one palette. Ultimately, at the end of the day, we are going to continue to be inundated with new releases. Like, it really has not slowed down. But if you look at a lot of those new releases, a lot of them are kind of repetitive themes. It's rare to see something that really brings something new to the table. And I think if we can just sort of take a step back, really like literally look at what we already have, even just a mental rundown of what you already love. Do you really think that that is going to become the absolute favorite? And in having said all that, sometimes you just buy something because you want it, and that's totally fine. I'm not going to sit here and say that I've never bought something just because it was shiny and pretty. I recently color coordinated my closet, and it is shocking how much green clothing I have. And it's like all Kelly green, like it's all the same color. I don't need 6 green shirts. It's ridiculous. And yet, that's what I'm drawn to. I don't know, can't explain it. Wouldn't even say that green is my favorite color. Maybe it is, and I'm just not aware of that. I'm living in denial thinking, no, it's blue. Not based on my closet. Anyways, I am off topic, and I am going to cede defeat at this point because I have been rambling quite a bit. I have edited heavily, and I have kind of lost all direction in terms of how to wrap this up. I think, if I can tie it up with a little bow, is that expectation is not always reality, and I think there is value in taking time and really thinking about what it is that we're about to purchase, particularly eyeshadow palettes, because they typically have the highest price tag. And I hope that this exercise of just showing you what I thought versus what it actually is, I hope that in some way that's helpful for you and helps you making informed decisions for yourself. So, with that said, I would love to know what your expectation versus reality was. What is the palette that you thought was going to be your favorite versus what is actually your favorite? Let me know in the comments. But with all that, I'm gonna wrap it up here. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch. I will see you in my next video, and until then, just be a decent human being. Bye for now.